In this video, I'm going to show you a very cool and useful tool in the Vectric design software that'll help prevent you from breaking your CNC router bits. idcwoodcraft.com. I'm Garrett with idcwoodcraft.com, the company you get your CNC router bits from. In this video, I'm going to run through something called the KeepOut Zone Manager in the Vectric software. This is something that has been added to version 12 and will be available from now on. What the KeepOut Zone Manager is, it's a feature that you can use to redirect your router bits when the software generates its toolpaths. Let's say you need to use clamps to hold your project down, or you're going to screw it down to the table. You want to make sure the router bit is not going to hit those clamps or drive through those screws. And so you can create zones where the router bit will not go where the clamps or the screws are. So we're going to get into the Vectric software. I'm using Vcarve Pro version 12, but this is available in all the Vectric software, Cut2D, Vcarve, and Aspire. Now I'm going to show you a bunch of other tools along the way that Vectric has added to the version 12 software, and a couple of little drawbacks that I have found as well. So watch through the whole video because you're going to learn a lot of little tips and tricks along the way. So we are getting into the Vectric Vcarve Pro version of Vectric. And you see in this project here, I have two rectangles. What I'm going to do is create keep-out zones, or areas where the router bit needs to avoid as it's moving the router bit around to cut out these projects. Now, to set the stage here, you can see in the upper left corner, this is my start point. This is where the router bit home position will be when it starts, and then the toolpaths will generate from there. It'll move down, cut this rectangle out and cut the other rectangle out. So what I need to do is get over to the toolpath area, and the way we do that is by coming up to the upper left next to the word design and click the little arrow that's pointing to the right. When we click that, the toolpath menu opens up. Now what we're going to do is do a simple profile cut around these rectangles. And what a profile cut is, basically the router bit is going to follow a profile or follow a line. We have two rectangles, so we'll just use this image here, the picture that's on the wall. It says IDC Woodcraft. That's a rectangle, and we're telling the software that we're simply going to cut around the profile of the rectangles. So this has no keep out zones in it. Now I'm just going to start this off with a basic toolpath to help you understand how this is going to work. So we're going to go into the profile toolpath, which is right up at the top. It's the very first icon. When you hover over it, it says profile toolpath. Select that and the menu opens up, and that's where we're going to set up all the parameters for the profile. Up top it says start depth. We're going to start at the 0 or at the top of the material. The cut depth is 0.75, which is cutting all the way through. Now you may have more things in this entire menu, and that would be because this little checkbox here says show advanced toolpaths. When we click that, you'll notice that the more stuff shows up in the menus, but I'm going to turn that off for now just to keep this a little clean. Now we need to set up our router bit. We are going to go with a 1/4 inch end mill, so I don't need to add one, but if you need to add one or change it, just simply select the select button. The tool database will open up, and then you can select your router bit. If you're new to the Vectric software and you don't have a complete populated database, Vectric does not come with very many tools populated in its database. So you can go to idcwoodcraft.com. At the top of the website it says database downloads. Select that, and then you can get the database for Vectric, Fusion 360, CarveCo, and Carbide Create, and these databases are completely populated. Basically, it's going to save you a ton of manual entry. So every router bit that's in IDC Woodcraft is in that database. So I suggest you just do that, save yourself a lot of work, especially if you're brand new, because it really can leave you open for errors when you're punching in a whole bunch of numbers. You'll see if you decide to do this manually. I'll put a link down in the description to take you directly to that page on the IDC website. So I'm going to close that because I have the router bit that I need. And then we are going to set our machine vectors. We are going to actually cut right on the line. So in other words, the router bit center of rotation will be following the line. We can set it to inside the line or outside the line, basically like on this sign here. Inside the line would be, it would be cutting inside the rectangle. going all the way around. Outside the line would be cutting around the outside of the rectangle all the way around. So we're going to leave it just on the line, and we're not going to do any other settings. Down at the bottom it says Profile 2. Now normally we would rename this toolpath to, well, we'll just do it because it stay in the habit, rectangles, and we'll call it the tool. So it's a down cut, 1/4 down cut, 1/4 inch. And we need to select the two rectangles. So I'm going to hover up to the right somewhere, hold my left mouse button down, and select both rectangles. They are now selected. And you see these little green corners pop up. These are where the router bit is going to start. So what we have at this point is my start point is at the upper left corner, and then the router bit will start from there, and it's going to draw a straight line down to this bead right here, and then it's going to make its profile cut, and then it will move over to the other bead and do its profile cut. Let's calculate. And there we go. I'm going to reset this preview. So there's our toolpath. Now, one of the things with the Vectric software, normally in the older versions, in order to rotate this project around like this, you would hold your left mouse button down, but that no longer works. You have to do it with the right mouse button. But here is a new feature they have added. It's this little toggle box at the upper right of the screen, where when I hover over it, the different triangles of the box turn black, and that's indicating that's the selected zone that I want to rotate to. So when I'm hovered over this particular rectangle here and I click my left mouse button, the project is going to reorient itself in the screen just like that. Or if I click the one that says front, it'll show me the front. Or the other thing I can do is simply hold my left mouse button down and just pull on that toggle box to get whatever orientation I want. I'm going to flip back to the top by simply clicking the word top in this little toggle box, and we reorient ourselves. Now you can see here, first of all, I'm moving this around by holding my scroll wheel down, straight down, and now I can pan around. But we can see the start point. This red line indicates the rapid motion of the router bit. So it's starting at the upper left corner of the project, and it rapids down to this lower left corner of the rectangle, and then it does all its cuts, which is all the blue lines there. And we can see it's going to make multiple cuts. I'm going to reorient this a little bit so you can see this better. And so all these blue lines are passes around that rectangle. It's going to do 6 of them, and then it will pull back out, and it's going to rapid back over to, and it's going to rapid over to the other rectangle, and cut that out. Now you can see when I reorient to the top, it's going to go straight across. Now let's just pretend that I have some clamps in here, and I need to place them in the path of these motions, the rapid motions of this project. Now, to be clear on what's going to happen here is you cannot put a clamp or a keep out zone in the middle of an actual carve area. So we got the profile cut around the rectangle. We can't put a clamp around that area. That's an actual carve area, but we can put it where a rapid move is going to be, or where the red lines are going. So we're going to create some keep out zones. Now here's one of the cool features that Vectric has added. We can actually do some editing in the 3D area instead of having to go back to 2D. Here's what I mean. First, I'm going to close this menu, and when we come up to the upper left, there's this little tab that says 3D and 2D, and 3D is highlighted black right now, which means that we are on the 3D screen. If I go to 2D, then we can see the 2D aspect of this screen as well. But I'm going to stay in the 3D mode, and I'm going to come back over the toolpaths and switch back to design. Now I do that by clicking this little arrow here, and when I click it with my left mouse button, we get back to the design screen, but we are still looking at the 3D view of this thing. Now let's say right in this area, right where the tool is starting to go to the first rectangle, I'm going to have a clamp there. So we're going to just create a simulated clamp. I'm going to select a rectangle, and I'm going to draw that rectangle. It'll just randomly draw. Now Here are some new features that are in the Vectric software. As you can see, this rectangle has all kinds of stuff in it. I'm going to come back to this. First of all, we're just going to keep this as a keep out zone. Now let's say that we have another rectangle or clamp that's right down here. So I know that in my design I'm going to be clamping the material in these areas, and these clamps are in the way of these tool paths. So you can see at the top, the red tool path goes right through that clamp, and then when it goes across to the second one, it's going right through that one as well. So we're going to close this rectangle and switch back to toolpath. Now in the Vectric software, they've added a new icon. Just to define these icons, all these brown icons are carving icons. The ones down below are management icons. We are going to go to the bottom row, the fourth one in. When you hover over it, it says Manage Keep Out Zones. When we select that, this little menu comes up that says Manage Keep Out Zones, and we have this area that says clearance. Currently it says 0.5, but it will start out with a 0, so I'm just going to leave a 0 there. And then it has two buttons, Clear Zones and Create from Selection. So right now, if you look at the 3D drawing, there is the clamp that I created in the middle that's in between the first rectangle and the second rectangle. That is the selection. So when I click the button Create from Selection, it's going to create a red box. And you notice right away, in that red box, the toolpath that once went across to start the second rectangle has now changed its direction. It's gone above the red zone and then back down to that start point. So what this has done, it has immediately created this red zone where the router bit is not allowed to go, so it redirected the toolpath up and around it. And this is how you will prevent breaking router bits. You have a clamp right there. You tell the software there's a clamp right there, and it will immediately redirect the toolpath up around it. So let's go back in and create a second keep out zone. So I'm going to first just hold my shift button down and select the other clamp that I've created that's going to go, that's in the way of the path going to the first rectangle, and I'm going to click the Create from Selection again. Created a second keep out zone. And you can see the router bit has now gone around that, and then it goes down to the first rectangle. So you notice here that it comes relatively close to this keep out zone. Now let's say that this is the actual size of your clamp. Well, we are using a 1/4 inch router bit, and there's only a little bit of space where that red line goes around the clamp. Now, if that clamp is your physical clamp, that edge of that router bit is actually going to come right along the edge of the router bit. That red line is the center axis of your rotating tool. And then what the software is doing is taking into account half that diameter, and now it's offsetting that new tool path by, in this case, 1/8 of an inch, which is half of a 1/4 inch tool. But let's just say, because this is the size of my clamp, I want a little more space to come around that clamp. We can fix that real quick. This is what I mean right in this area. That distance from here to here is 1/8 of an inch. So in order to get a little bit more distance around this clamp, we're going to come over to the clearance box, and we're going to change that number to 0.25. And what you'll see now is it has created this virtual area, the dashed line around there. That's a 0.25 inches distance right there. And then it's also moved the tool path over by another 1/8 or half diameter of the router bit. And so that has created a safety zone around the keep out zone. And then it did the same thing on the other keep out zone. So now when I close that and I generate my tool path, that's exactly what it's going to look like. So now let's regenerate the tool path, and we'll look at the tool path by clicking this little icon that has the little movie YouTube image in it. And it says preview toolpaths. Select that, and then we're going to slow the router bit way down. So in order to generate your speed of the display here, this little slide bar will increase it or decrease it. And I'm going to show you what I mean. We're going to click Preview Selected Toolpath. First, I'm going to get this project in the center of the screen. Click Preview Selected Toolpath, and it goes right in to start carving all this out. And we can see that it is carving everything out. Now I'm going to reorient this so we can see this a little bit better. We're going to reset the toolpath and then Preview Selected Toolpath. And we can see the router bit running around. Now, let's say you want to stop this regeneration. It's taking too long. Then here's what you do. Just a little extra tip. I'm going to reset this toolpath. I'm going to set Preview Toolpath again. But first I'm going to bring the slider down so it runs a little bit slower. And click Preview Selected Toolpath. And now the router bit is starting to run around. But let's say I just want to stop this from doing its thing. Way down at the bottom, as it's generated its toolpath, you'll see this blue bar that's expanding across the screen from left to right. If we want to stop this whole toolpath generation, there's going to be this little red X at the right end of the screen. When you click that, it'll stop the toolpath generation. So we'll click that, and it has stopped that toolpath generating. So I'm going to slow this way down and see if we can actually see the router bit go around this KeepOut zone. So let's just orient this a little bit differently, and then I'm going to reset, slow this way down, and click Preview Selected Toolpath. And so when you do a rapid, it does not actually show the rapid motion of the router bit. So I'm going to click Stop again on this toolpath and then reset the preview and close that menu. And then reorient this to the top by clicking the little toggle box, click the switch on the top. So we'll click that, and there we go. So now we've got these two rectangles here, and we have our two KeepOut zones. Now I've shown you all these features about the KeepOut tool and how to work with it, but there are limitations with it and things that you can't do, and we're going to get into that in just a moment. But first I want to show you a very cool thing that's been added to Vectric in the version 12, as that was not available in the earlier versions, and that is the ability to create your designs in the 3D modeling area and to edit them. Now, there are limitations in that as well, which I will cover here. But this is a huge advance in the Vectric software, where now you can do a lot of your design work right there, generate your tool paths, modify your design, regenerate them without having to pop back and forth between the design area and the tool path area. So we're going to get into that next. First, if you're a beginner, just getting into CNC, and you're trying to figure out what CNC router bits you need to start off with, you might want to stop by idcwoodcraft.com. When I was in your shoes 4 years ago, just getting into CNC routers, I didn't know what router bits I needed, and the router bit companies didn't seem to provide the information nor the full-blown kits that we need to start with. So I put together a 12-piece kit for you as a beginner. The kit is designed to cover virtually everything that you can come up with your designs. In the future, you'll get more bits as you move along, but this will get you rocking and rolling in, like I said, virtually anything you can design. On top of that, I throw in a lot of documentation that you are going to need for your router bits. It's all right there. And I'm giving you 7 design files, starter files with instructions and G-code in some cases. So just to help you get going in one shot. It's basically a one and done set. So take a look at idcwoodcraft.com. Right on the home page, you can go right to the sets and you will see it. I'll put a link in the description below so that you can just click that and hop right over to the website. All right, let's get into the Vectric where we can edit in the 3D modeling area, which is super, super cool. Let's go. Let's just say this clamp is the wrong size, this KeepOut zone. It's going to be a little bit bigger. What we can do is click right on the rectangle and click it again, and then these beads come up. Now, this is not something that was in the 3D feature in the earlier versions, 11.5 and earlier. Now, these beads enable you to make adjustments as you would normally be able to do in your 2D designs. For example, this little black bead right in the middle, when you can grab that, you can hold your left mouse button down and move it around. Now, you notice these little white boxes popped up. And what these little white boxes are little editing zones so you can change things. For example, let's just say the 4.9125 that's the X position of this rectangle from the center, from this left side of the project to the center bead. And let's say I want it at 5 inches. So I just highlight that like it is right now, type in 5 and hit enter, and watch the rectangle when I hit enter. It's going to move just slightly to that 5-inch position. So when we hover over these beads, these little windows are going to pop up. For example, the right bead, when I hover over it, you'll see the little box right down at the bottom. It says 0.9, and that's the width of that rectangle. When we click that, now we can edit that box. And I'm going to change that to 1.0 to make it a 1-inch rectangle. So 1.0, when I hit enter, the rectangle is going to expand left to right to 1 inch. Click that, and now it's a bigger rectangle. And so this is another cool feature, and same thing with the dots below and above. You click that, and that's going to change the height of the rectangle. Right now it's 4.4. Let's say it's going to be 5. I'm going to hit 5, hit enter, and now we have a longer rectangle. The other cool features are this little bead, the white rectangle bead on the 4 corners. You grab that, and that's going to expand and contract in scale on your X and Y. Now, if I hold my shift button down and do that, it's going to do it from center. Now, here's the cool feature that I really like is this little round item right here. Now, one of the cool features I really like is this little round bead. When you click that, now you have this 0 there. If I take that and hold my left mouse button down and then drag it inward, now I'm creating radiuses on my rectangle. If I drag it outward, it's going to create inverted radiuses, just like that. And let's just say, oops, I didn't want that. I just wanted a square corner. I can go into that box, highlight it, hit 0, and that's going to return us to 0. And the final one is this little arc thing at the top. When you hover over that, your cursor turns into a little circle. That means I can rotate it around. I get this little box where I can change the angle of that. Let's go back to 0. I didn't mean to move that, so I'm going to type in 0, hit enter, and now we are back to our rectangle. Now, I want to make 2 points here. We've been altering a rectangle that we built for KeepOut zone. But all these alterations that we've been making, the radiuses and the concave corners, changing the angle, changing the size, changing the position, we can do that on any of your elements that you've designed in the 2D side. You can do all this stuff in the 3D side for anything that you're going to be carving. So it's not just the KeepOut zones that you're needing to do this edit. This is a feature you can do with any of your designs. Also, we have changed the size of the KeepOut zone. We made it longer, wider, taller, changed the angle, moved it. We did all kinds of things. That means we have to go back into the KeepOut zone and redefine that KeepOut zone. So here's what I mean. We are going to hit the escape button to deselect this rectangle. Nope, we have to redefine the KeepOut zones. So we go back into KeepOut zones, and you notice now we've got this red here. That is the original rectangle size, but not the new rectangle size. What we have to do is clear the KeepOut zones and redefine them. So you'll hit the clear zones, and then hold your shift button down if you have multiple zones, so you can select multiple ones. And when you do that, then you can click the button, create from selection, and now we have new KeepOut zones. And I click close, and we are ready to go. By looking at the toolpath, we need to check the little checkbox under toolpaths next to that particular toolpath, which is rectangles, rectables is the way I've spelled it by accident. Click the checkbox, and now you can see the router bit is going around that still. All right, so let's get into a little bit different thing about KeepOut zones. Let's say we have a screw that we're using, so we want to protect us around a round thing, a 1/4-inch screw or whatever. So I'm going to go back into the drawing tool by simply clicking the little arrow up in toolpath, and then grab a circle, and we're going to create, we'll put this little circle right here. That way it's in the way of the current toolpath. And I'm going to close the circle command, and we're going to go back to the toolpath area, and the circle is selected. So we're going to go back to KeepOut zones, and we're going to deselect our KeepOut zones because, well, I think I can hold shift down. No, we're going to deselect them or clear the zones, and then we're going to select the rectangle, the circle, and the other rectangle, and then click Create from Selection. And click that, and so you notice on the circle, it is not a circle or round KeepOut zone, it's actually created a rectangle. This is the core KeepOut zone, and then it's created a rectangle around that KeepOut zone. But I want you to notice something else. These little red lines that are kind of hard to see, it comes around and then it goes around this other KeepOut zone. And the reason this whole area is now a KeepOut zone is because up in our key clearance area, we have defined 0.25. So that 1/4 inch on the circle is out to this point right here, and then the 1/4 inch from the rectangle is up to here, and those two zones cross. Therefore, it's creating a KeepOut zone that is kind of odd shaped. So the router bit will work around those KeepOut zones. So I'm going to show you one other thing. I'm going to open up a different one I've got set up, and now what I've done is I have set this up so that the two rectangles, this one and this one, are going to be cut, and I've created this kind of weird KeepOut zone area. I'm going to move this circle, so between the two long bars that are going up and down, the circle and the other clamp that's up in the upper corner. One thing I've done is I've made these bars go off the project. This bar goes off the top of the project, this bar goes off the bottom of the project, and these two rectangles on the left and right are going to be what I'm going to carve, and my start point is the upper left corner. So the router bit will now have to come around this clamp, come down, and start to cut this out, and then it's going to have to come around this circle and then come through these two KeepOut zones to get to this other clamp. So I'm going to first create my toolpath. I'm going to select rectangle 1 and hold the shift button down, select rectangle 2, and we are going to calculate this. And now we have the straight toolpath because I have not defined the KeepOut zone, so it comes straight down to the first rectangle and straight over to the second rectangle. I'm going to close that and define my KeepOut zones by clicking Manage KeepOut Zones. And I'm going to create from selection again. So we're going to do these 4 elements, create from selection, and now the router bit has to work its way all the way around all these elements in order to get it. Now we've covered most of the KeepOut zone stuff, but there is something else you need to know about with the KeepOut zone, and that's the errors that Vectric will return to you. Sometimes we create a KeepOut zone that the program cannot honor for various reasons, and that's what we're going to get into next. But I do want to talk to you about one thing. This whole idea of a KeepOut zone, this is where you're going to anticipate putting screws to hold your project down or clamps to make sure your router bit doesn't run into them, and you can use it for other reasons as well. Like if you want to avoid certain areas of a carve that you've already worked on, you want to make sure that router bit will not pass through it. It's a very cool feature, but getting to this KeepOut zone, this is all part of anticipating a good setup of your project. As CNC creators, we often think, well, the carve is the most important thing that we're going to get out of this thing, which it is. We've done a lot of work on it, but that carve can be set up to have problems if you don't do your setup right. Actually, setup is the most important aspect of the entire process because that's going to prevent your project from moving, making sure that you set your XYZ 0 points, your materials set right, you understand the material sizes relative to your design, and that's why I created the CNC project setup checklist. This is something that I made for myself because I was making a ton of mistakes. We just forget the steps in the setup. It's kind of a long list, but there are a lot of simple things that we do anyway. but because of that, we can forget stuff. And so after I started using this, this really took my unexpected problems like router bit breaks or bit slips or the project moving or me even forgetting to turn the router on. This has prevented that, and it covers all that. It covers material checks, router bit checks, your start point XYZ0 checks, how many of us have forgotten to set that, and some final checks. But this works so well for me that I want to give it to you. It even covers clamps, right? Your keep out zones. I'm making this available to you for free. If you want to get this, I suggest that you use this every time because it'll just help you avoid problems. So if you want the setup checklist, you can have it for free as a download. I'll put a link down below in the description so that you can download it. It's got instructions for everything, like all the items that are on there. It tells you why exactly those items are on there. Most of the stuff you do already, but you got the instructions with it too. So click the link down below, get that, it's free to you, you might as well. All right, let's get back into the Vectric software with this keep out zone thing and talk about the errors that will be returned if keep out zones are set up wrong. And here's where the errors come up, where Vectric says you can't do this. So we're gonna go back into, we're gonna create, clear the keep out zones. And I'm going to take that circle and I'm going to, with my arrow keys, I'm going to move it in the path so that there is no way this router bit can go around. So the first thing I want you to understand about what it can't do, you can't create a keep out zone where the router bit will go outside the material and come back in. For example, if this is the start point and we created a keep out zone where the router bit has to come out and around outside the material, you will get a red alert. Matter of fact, I'm going to show that to you by moving this clamp so it touches this one. And here's what you're going to see. I'm going to simply click all these, and it's going to give me an alarm right away. I'm going to create from selection, and now it's created all these weird little shapes. These shapes are areas that the router bit cannot go to, and it basically is blocking the router bit from doing anything. And so what happens is we've got this little stop sign that has shown up, or this do not enter sign. So what it's going to do is it's going to create the toolpath by basically negating the keep out zone. It's just going to ignore them, and it will generate the toolpath as it will do. We're going to close that, go into toolpath. We're going to tell it to recalculate, and it says keep out zones violation. Basically, it's saying we can't follow a keep out zone that you've created. I'm going to click OK, and then it says all toolpaths created successfully, and so now we have these little do not enter signs. If I generate this toolpath, it is going to carve out the toolpaths, but those keep out zones are completely negated. So that's one of the things with the keep out zones, but it's going to give you this alarm. So we're going to clear that. We're going to come back into this keep out zone. We're going to move this clamp back out of the way, just like that, so that the router bit can go around and go to the first project. And we're going to recalculate. So whenever you remove something or change something, you always have to recalculate. And also, if you change the size of your keep out zones, you have to redefine your keep out zones. So I'm going to go into the recalculate button, which is this zigzag button with the green turny thing, whatever you call it. Click that, and it says keep out zone violation. Every time we are calculating and we have a violation, it's going to give us this alarm. I'm going to say OK, and then we're going to go with it. But I have to redefine my keep out zones. So this is something I moved the rectangle, and that didn't work. So I have to clear my selection of my keep out zones, reselect my rectangles for my keep out zones, and then create from selection. And then we're going to close, and it's created this weird keep out zone shape. Let's see if we can recalculate. It says it can't do one of them, and here's what we got. It can't honor the second keep out zone. That's what that little red flag means. That means you have to move your KeepOut zone somewhere else, but it could carve the first one because it could create a path to go through there. Now I'm going to delete the circle. We're going to go back into KeepOut zone. One more thing here, and then I'm going to cover a couple extra things that Vectric has put in here and something you can't do that would be nice. We're going to clear the KeepOut zones. We're going to go with these 3 rectangles as KeepOut zones, create from selection, and you can see the router bit is now defining its path around all these zones. Now there's something else I want to show you in this Vectric version 12 that's not related to the KeepOut zone thing. It has to do with editing and designing in the 3D modeling area. Now what I mean by this is we're working in Vectric version 12. So 12 and beyond is going to give you the capability to do design work in the 3D view of your work here, where before version 12 you had to do your design work in the 2D tab and then do your toolpath generation in the 3D tab, and if you needed to make a modification then you had to go back to the 2D tab. But Vectric has actually added this really nice feature where you can do things in the 3D tab. You can add rectangles and squares and circles, you can position them, you can draw lines, but there are some editing limitations with that where when you make a certain mistake or two, then you have to actually go back to the 2D tab to fix it. In this case, we're going to talk specifically about the trim function, where you clip lines or boxes, you know, where boxes intersect, things like that. So we're going to get into that now. We've been at this for about 30 minutes, so you've learned a lot, not just about the designing, but the KeepOut zone and how you can manipulate your shapes in the 3D side, and you'll learn that you can actually design in the 3D side. If these tips have been helpful, give me a thumbs up, please, and a comment down below, something I might have missed, or questions that I'll probably make videos on. So yeah, comments down below, and be sure to drop by IDC Woodcraft for your CNC router bits. That's how you can support me in what I do for you to help you become a better CNC creator, teaching you all this stuff. All right, let's get into this other thing, this little limitation that's in the version 12 that I have right now. So we are in the 3D model area, and I want to modify this rectangle here. And so what I'm going to do is draw a little rectangle that's going off of that right there. We're just going to go like that. I just want this weird shape right there for my rectangle. Now you notice I can edit this entire rectangle as soon as I drew it, where I can do anything that I showed you before, but we're just going to run with that. I'm going to close that, and I want to try to cut with it. I want to cut this area right here. When I hit the cut function, the little scissors don't come up that enable me to cut it. So in order to modify and cut or trim, we have to, I need to make sure my toolpaths are closed. In order to trim, we have to be in the 2D view. So I'm going to come up to this tab, click 2D view, come down to the scissors, and then just trim here and trim there, and now we are in good shape, and we've created that new toolpath, and or that new shape. And now I have to redefine the KeepOut zone. We're going to come back in, clear those selections, click select all 3 again, create from selection, and now you see what it has done. So this is another interesting thing. Even though we've created, or we've got to certainly have a clear path that that router bit can go through, we're going to go back to 3D view. It has created a KeepOut zone that we cannot get through. Why has it done this when we have a clear path that goes around this project and over that way? And it's because what Vectric does is it takes the entire shape, and no matter how it's contorted, like in this case we got this little piece like this, and what it's doing is creating a solid box all the way around it. And so now it's created an area where in that box that where we normally would have that toolpath, we now cannot do it. I'm not sure I explained that well enough, so I'm going to explain it here. So we are going to draw that weird shape that I have in there. It's like that. And then we had another shape right there. And we're defining this shape as a KeepOut zone. Well, Vectric does not create funny shapes for KeepOut zones. It only creates rectangles for KeepOut zones. And what that means is it is going to take the top area here from one corner, and it's going to go all the way across to the furthest most point of whatever KeepOut zone you've created, which is right along this edge. We're going to dot up there, and now we get that corner. And that edge, if we go down there, straight down to this edge, and Now it's picked that point, and of course this corner, so this entire area is a keep out zone. And now we have that other piece that is also considered a keep out zone, and now it's created one in there. And so basically our keep out zone goes like this, just like that. So that is our keep out zone right there. And that's exactly why that it won't let that bit go through like that, because it has created a rectangle or a box keep out zone, and that's all it can do. So that's why that is there. And we cannot run this project, at least the second rectangle, with this shape right there with that. So you learn that you can't use the cut feature in the 3D view, and when you're doing a keep out zone, you can't create a shape like that and expect to be able to get the router bit around there. So now you know about the keep out zone and a couple other features and some limitations. The version 12 and higher does not run as fast right now as it did in versions 11 and below. You can't cut your projects, use the trim feature when you're in the 3D screen, but you can edit different things in the 3D screen, which is very, very cool. You can turn your material on and off, and you can create these keep out zones, but there are a couple limits to it. When you have different shapes and you're trying to create a keep out zone, it always creates a rectangle around the maximum size of the item that you have selected for a keep out zone. If you're brand new, please remember to drop by IDC Woodcraft, or if you just need new router bits, then IDC Woodcraft will have them. We're the only company that offers a 90-day, if you break it, I'll replace it guarantee. And if this video is helpful, give me a thumbs up. Comment down below on some of the things, maybe I missed something, and subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be pumping out a lot more videos about this software. I'm going to teach you about the CNC routers, how to work with CNC router bits. idcwoodcraft.com